The sun hung low over Wyoming's Wind River Range, casting a golden glow across the jagged silhouette of MtHooker, its sheer granite cliffs rising like a sentinel against the endless sky. Garrett Beckwith, a wiry man in his late 40s with a weathered face etched by years of scaling peaks, adjusted the straps of his backpack, his calloused hands moving with practiced precision. Beside him, his 19-year-old daughter Della stood with a quiet confidence, her dark braids swinging as she checked her climbing gear. The two were a seasoned pair, having conquered countless routes together since Della was old enough to tie a figure-8 knot. Their bond was forged in the crucible of high-altitude adventures, where trust was not just a feeling but a lifeline. This climb, a challenging multi-pitch route up MtHooker's notorious northwest face, was meant to be their crowning achievement of the summer of 2014, a father-daughter triumph to cap Della's first year of college. They'd spent months planning, poring over topographic maps, studying weather patterns, and packing enough supplies for a week, though they expected to summit and return within 3 days. Their truck, parked at the trailhead, was stocked with extra food and water, but in a fateful oversight, they'd left their satellite phone behind, nestled in the glove compartment. Garrett had chuckled about it as they set off, saying, "We've got each other, Delaware. That's all we need." Della had rolled her eyes, her grin betraying her affection for her father's old-school optimism. The trail to the base of the climb wound through dense pine forests, the air thick with the scent of sap and the distant rush of a mountain stream. As they hiked, they traded stories, Garrett recounting his first ascent in the Tetons, Della teasing him about his outdated climbing slang. By noon, they reached the base of the cliff, a towering expanse of gray rock streaked with quartz veins, its surface both inviting and foreboding. The first pitch was straightforward, a series of handholds and footholds that allowed them to find their rhythm. Garrett led, his movements deliberate, while Della followed, her lithe frame navigating the rock with an almost instinctive grace. They called out to each other, their voices echoing off the stone, a familiar cadence of encouragement and caution. By dusk, they'd reached a narrow ledge 800 feet up, where they set up their portaledge, a suspended platform that would serve as their camp for the night. The sunset painted the sky in hues of crimson and violet, and Della snapped photos with her compact camera, joking about framing one for their wall of fame back home. They ate a simple meal of dehydrated chili, the silence of the mountains settling around them like a heavy blanket. Garrett pointed out constellations, his voice soft as he traced Orion's belt with a gloved finger. Della listened, her head resting on her folded arms, feeling the weight of the moment, not just the climb, but the unspoken understanding that this was a memory they'd carry forever. Or so they thought. The next morning, a faint mist clung to the cliff, and the air felt heavier, charged with the promise of a storm. They debated waiting it out but decided to push on, confident in their skills and the forecast that predicted clear skies by afternoon. The next pitch was more technical, requiring precise footwork and a series of dynamic moves to clear an overhang. Garrett went first, his chalk-dusted hands gripping the rock as he disappeared over the lip. Della waited below, belaying him, her eyes scanning the horizon where dark clouds were beginning to gather. She called up, "You good, Dad?" His voice came back, steady but distant. "Solid as a rock, kiddo." Those were the last words she heard from him. Minutes later, the rope went slack, a climber's worst nightmare. Della tugged at it, shouting his name, but the only response was the whistle of wind through the crags. Panic clawed at her chest, but she forced herself to stay calm, tying off the rope and free climbing to the overhang. When she reached it, Garrett was gone. No trace of him remained. Not his gear, not his chalk bag, not even a scuff mark on the rock. It was as if the mountain had swallowed him whole. Della's mind raced, torn between searching for him and securing herself. She clipped into an anchor, her hands trembling as she scanned the cliff face. The storm was closing in fast, the wind now howling, carrying flecks of icy rain. She shouted until her voice was hoarse, but the mountain offered no answers. Alone on the ledge, Della made a decision born of desperation. She would climb higher, hoping to find her father or at least a vantage point to spot him. She moved with a frenetic energy, her training kicking in despite the fear gnawing at her. The rock grew slicker with each passing minute, the storm now a full-blown tempest, lightning cracking in the distance. She reached a small alcove, barely wide enough for her to crouch, and set up a makeshift camp, securing her gear against the wind. Her journal, tucked in a waterproof pouch, became her confidant as she scribbled her thoughts, her fears, her hope that Garrett was somehow safe. "Dad's out there," she wrote. "He has to be." I'll find him. I won't stop. The storm raged for 2 days, pinning her in the alcove, her supplies dwindling as she rationed her food and water. On the 3rd day, the skies cleared, but exhaustion and hunger were taking their toll. Della knew she couldn't stay put. She had to move either up or down. She chose up, driven by a stubborn belief that her father was waiting for her at the summit. The climb was grueling, her fingers numb, her body aching, but she pressed on, driven by memories of their past climbs, of Garrett's voice urging her to keep going, Dell, one hold at a time. She reached a high ledge, nearly 2,000 feet above the base, and found a crevice where she could rest. There, she set up her portaledge again, anchoring it to the rock with meticulous care. She left markers, bright orange cord tied to pitons, a scrap of her red bandana, hoping rescuers would see them, but no one came. The days blurred together, the mountain's silence deafening. Della's journal entries grew shorter, her words more fragmented. Cold. So cold. Dad, where are you? I'm trying. Her final entry, dated a week after their ascent began, was a single line. I love you, Dad. I'm sorry. Below, at the trailhead, their absence had sparked alarm. When they failed to check in, Garrett's brother, Tom, alerted the authorities. Search teams scoured the base of MtHooker, helicopters buzzing overhead, but the cliff's inaccessibility and the storm's ferocity hampered their efforts. The Wind River Range was vast, its terrain unforgiving, and the Beckwith's route was known only to them. Weeks turned into months, then years, and the case grew cold. The climbing community whispered about the tragedy. 2 experienced climbers vanished without a trace. Theories swirled. A fall, a storm, a bear attack, even foul play, but no evidence supported any of them. The Beckwith family clung to hope, organizing annual searches, but the mountain remained silent. Della's mother, Ellen, visited the trailhead every summer, leaving flowers at the base, whispering prayers to the wind. Tom, a climber himself, retraced their route as far as he dared, but the cliff's upper reaches were too treacherous for most. The mystery of Garrett and Della Beckwith became a legend, a cautionary tale told around campfires, a reminder of the mountain's power to claim even the most skilled. 11 years passed, the seasons eroding the edges of hope, until a chance discovery reignited the saga. In the summer of 2025, 2 climbers, scaling a remote section of MtHooker, stumbled upon a weathered portaledge, its fabric frayed but intact, suspended on a sheer cliff face. Inside, they found gear matching the Beckwith's packing list. A stove, a sleeping bag, a journal with Della's handwriting. The discovery was a gut punch, raising more questions than answers. How had they survived long enough to set up such a camp? Why was only Della's gear found? And what had happened to Garrett? The sleeping bag held a single chilling clue. A small, carved wooden figure, a bear, which Garrett had made for Della when she was a child. It was clutched tightly, as if it were her last connection to her father. The climbers radioed for help, and soon, search teams converged, their findings splashed across headlines. The Beckwith family, now older and wearier, returned to the mountain, their grief rekindled but laced with a desperate need for closure. The journal, water-stained but legible, offered glimpses of Della's final days, but no clear answers. The wooden bear, though, spoke of a bond unbroken, even in the face of the unknown. As investigators combed the site, the mountain loomed above, its secrets still locked in stone, whispering only to those who dared to listen. Echoes of the lost. The discovery of the Beckwith's cliff camp in the summer of 2025 sent shockwaves through the tight-knit climbing community and beyond, rekindling a mystery that had long faded into the annals of Wind River lore. The weathered portaledge, dangling precariously at 2,000 feet on MtHooker's northwest face, was a time capsule of tragedy, its contents meticulously catalogued by the search team that rappelled to the site under the watchful eyes of helicopters. The team, led by Ranger Sarah Tillman, a seasoned veteran with a no-nonsense demeanor, worked with surgical precision, their gloved hands sifting through the remnants of Della and Garrett's final days. The portaledge held a sleeping bag, a small propane stove with a single canister, a tattered backpack, and Della's journal, its pages brittle but legible, each entry a haunting snapshot of her descent into desperation. The wooden bear figurine, its edges smoothed by years of exposure, was the most poignant find, clutched inside the sleeping bag as if Della had held it until her final moments. The absence of Garrett's gear was glaring. No rope, no harness, no chalk bag. Only a single carabiner, its gate rusted shut, clipped to an anchor bolt. Sarah noted the anomaly in her report. A climber of Garrett's caliber wouldn't vanish without leaving some trace, unless something or someone had erased it. The journal offered fragments of Della's mindset. Her fear after Garrett's disappearance, her determination to climb higher, her dwindling supplies, and her fading hope. Entries dated August 12, 2014, described strange noises at night. Like footsteps on the rock, but no one's there, and a fleeting glimpse of movement above the ledge, too quick to identify. "I thought it was Dad," she wrote. "But it wasn't. Or was it?" The ambiguity gnawed at Sarah, who'd seen her share of mountain mysteries but never one so perplexing. The camp's location, high on an uncharted route, suggested Della had climbed alone after Garrett vanished, a feat that spoke to her skill and stubborn resolve. But why hadn't she descended? And where was Garrett? The questions piled up like storm clouds, and Sarah's team expanded their search, combing the cliff for additional clues. They found faint scratches on the rock near the portal edge, possibly from a tool or a fall, but nothing definitive. Below, at the base, volunteers scoured the talus field, hoping for remnants of gear or grimly remains, but the mountain yielded nothing. The media descended on the Wind River Range, their vans clogging the dirt road to the trailhead, reporters thrusting microphones at anyone who'd talk. "Vanished climbers camp found after 11 years, screamed the headlines, each story speculating wildly. Alien abductions, secret government experiments, or a tragic accident swept away by time. The Beckwith family, thrust back into the spotlight, bore the renewed attention with a mix of hope and dread. Ellen Beckwith, now in her 60s, her auburn hair streaked with gray, arrived at the base camp with Tom, Garrett's brother, whose once robust frame had softened with age but whose eyes still burned with a climber's intensity. Ellen clutched a photo of Garrett and Della, taken on their last climb together in Colorado, their smiles radiant against a backdrop of snow-dusted peaks. "They were out there alive longer than we thought," she whispered to Tom, her voice trembling. "What happened to them?" Tom, who'd led private searches every summer since 2014, felt the weight of those 11 years. Every dead-end trail, every false lead, every sleepless night wondering if he'd failed his brother. The journal's discovery was a double-edged sword. It confirmed Della's survival for at least a week after Garrett's disappearance, but it also deepened the mystery of their fate. Tom pored over the journal, photocopied by the rangers to preserve the original, searching for clues in Della's hurried handwriting. One entry, dated August 14, 2014, stood out. "Saw something in the mist. A shape tall, moving fast. Not a bear. Not Dad. I'm scared but I can't stop." Tom's gut twisted. He knew the mountain's tricks. Optics could distort shadows, fatigue could conjure phantoms, but Della's words felt too specific, too vivid. He shared the entry with Sarah, who raised an eyebrow but didn't dismiss it. "High altitude does things to the mind," she said, "but I've heard stories about this mountain. Locals talk about watchers. Figures that appear and vanish. Probably just folklore, but..." She trailed off, her skepticism warring with the unease in her gut. The investigation took a new turn when a forensic team analyzed the gear. The sleeping bag tested positive for traces of blood, not enough to suggest a fatal injury but enough to raise alarms. DNA confirmed it was Della's, likely from a cut or abrasion, common in climbing but chilling in context. The wooden bear, however, held a stranger secret. Its base bore faint carvings, not visible to the naked eye but revealed under ultraviolet light. They were symbols, angular, almost runic, unlike anything Garrett, a hobbyist woodcarver, was known to create. A local anthropologist, Dr. Lena Carver, was called in to examine them. She identified similarities to indigenous markings from the Shoshone tribe, who'd long revered MtHooker as a sacred site. "These aren't decorative," Lena said, her voice low. "They're protective, meant to ward off spirits or something else." The revelation sent a ripple through the team. Ellen, a devout Christian, dismissed it as superstition, but Tom, who'd heard climbers' tales of eerie encounters, wasn't so sure. He remembered Garrett mentioning strange feelings on previous climbs, moments when the mountain felt alive, watching them. The carving suggested someone or something had been with Della in her final days. But who? And why? The search expanded to include interviews with local guides and climbers, some of whom recalled odd sightings in 2014. Fleeting shadows on the cliff, lights flickering high on the peak at night, sounds like distant voices carried by the wind. One guide, a grizzled man named Hank, swore he'd seen a figure watching him from a ridge during a solo climb that summer. "Tall, too tall to be human," he muttered, reluctant to say more. Sarah logged it as hearsay but couldn't shake the chill it gave her. Meanwhile, the climbing community rallied, organizing a crowd-funded expedition to retrace the Beckwith's route. Volunteers, including elite climbers from across the country, tackled the northwest face, their drones sweeping the cliff for hidden crevices or caves. They found nothing. No bodies, no gear, no sign of Garrett. But one climber, a young woman named Riley, discovered a faint trail of orange cord, tied to a piton 300 feet above the portal edge. It matched the markers Della had left, suggesting she'd climbed even higher before returning to the camp, or never returned at all. The cord was frayed, as if cut, not broken, adding another layer to the enigma. Was someone else on the mountain? A rival climber? A rescuer who never reported it? Or something less explainable? Ellen and Tom grappled with these questions at the base camp, where a makeshift memorial grew. Photos of Garrett and Della, flowers, climbing gear left by friends. Ellen spent hours staring at the cliff, as if she could will her daughter and husband back. Tom, meanwhile, took a more practical approach, hiring a private investigator, Marcus Reed, to dig into the case. Marcus, a former detective with a knack for cold cases, was skeptical of the supernatural theories but intrigued by the physical evidence. He focused on the timeline. Garrett vanished on August 9, 2014, during the storm. Della survived at least until August 15, based on her journal. The cut cord and the blood suggested a struggle or an accident, but the lack of Garrett's gear pointed to something deliberate. Marcus interviewed climbers who'd been in the area that summer, uncovering a lead. A transient climber, known only as Jace, had been seen near the trailhead days before the Beckwiths set out. Jace was a loner, rumored to have a grudge against experienced climbers like Garrett, whom he envied. He'd vanished shortly after, his whereabouts unknown. Marcus tracked down Jace's last known address, a rundown motel in Lander, Wyoming, but the trail went cold there. The possibility of foul play loomed, but without a body or more evidence, it was just another theory. As weeks passed, the investigation stalled, the mountain's vastness swallowing every lead. The Beckwith family faced a painful reality. The cliff camp had given them answers, but not the ones they'd hoped for. Ellen clung to the journal, reading Della's words nightly, searching for comfort in her daughter's courage. Tom planned another climb, determined to reach the summit, believing the truth lay higher up. Sarah, meanwhile, filed her report, noting the unresolved questions. The carvings, the cut cord, the missing gear, the strange sightings. The mountain, she wrote, holds its secrets like a vault, and we may never know what it took from the Beckwiths, or what they left behind. The memorial at the trailhead grew, a testament to a mystery that refused to fade, its shadow stretching across the years, as dark and unyielding as MtHooker itself. Shadows on the summit. Tom Beckwith stood at the base of MtHooker in late August 2025, the mountain's granite face looming above him like a judge passing sentence. At 52, his body ached from years of climbing, but the discovery of Della's cliff camp had reignited a fire in him that no amount of time or grief could extinguish. The journal, the carved bear, the cut cord, they were pieces of a puzzle he was determined to solve, even if it meant risking his own life on the same route that had claimed his brother and niece. He'd assembled a small elite team. Riley, the young climber who'd found the orange cord. Marcus Reed, the private investigator, who insisted on joining despite his limited climbing experience. And Lena Carver, the anthropologist, whose expertise on the Shoshone marking suggested the mountain held secrets beyond the physical. The group was equipped with cutting-edge gear, drones, thermal cameras, and a satellite phone Tom checked obsessively, haunted by Garrett's fatal decision to leave theirs behind. The air was crisp, the sky a deceptive blue, but Tom felt the mountain's weight, as if it were watching, waiting. He'd climbed MtHooker before, but never this high, never this route. The northwest face was a beast, its cracks and overhangs demanding absolute precision. As they began the ascent, Tom's mind replayed Della's journal. Her fear, her glimpses of movement, her cryptic mention of a shape in the mist. He pushed the thoughts aside, focusing on the rock, his hands finding holds with a muscle memory honed over decades. Riley led the first pitch, her movements fluid, her voice steady as she called down anchors. Marcus, clipped to the rope, struggled but kept pace, his determination outweighing his inexperience. Lena, surprisingly adept for an academic, climbed with a quiet intensity, her eyes scanning the rock for more carvings. By midday, they reached the ledge where Della's portal edge had been found, now cleared by the rangers but marked by faint scratches and the ghostly outline of pitons. Tom knelt, tracing the rock with his fingers, as if he could summon his niece's presence. "She was here," he whispered, his voice catching. Riley nodded, pointing to a faint trail of orange cord snaking upward, barely visible against the gray stone. "She went higher," Riley said. "Why didn't she come down?" The question hung unanswered, heavy as the pack on Tom's back. They pressed on, the climb growing steeper, the air thinner. At 2,300 feet, they found another marker, a scrap of red fabric, unmistakably Della's bandana, tied to a piton. It was frayed but intact, its presence a beacon and a taunt. Lena examined it, noting a faint smudge of charcoal on the knot, as if someone had marked it deliberately. "This isn't random," she said, her voice low. "It's a signal, but for who?" Tom's gut churned. He'd hoped for answers, but each clue deepened the mystery. The team set up camp for the night, their portaledges swaying in the wind, the mountain's silence broken only by the creak of ropes and the distant howl of a coyote. Marcus, studying the journal's photocopies by headlamp, pointed out a recurring phrase in Della's entries. "The Watcher." She'd mentioned it 3 times, always at night, always with a mix of fear and curiosity. "Could be hallucination," Marcus said, ever the skeptic. "High altitude, stress, dehydration, she was in bad shape." Lena shook her head. "The Shoshone stories talk about watchers, spirits or entities tied to sacred peaks. They're not just myths, they're warnings." Tom listened, torn between dismissing it as folklore and feeling the mountain's eerie presence. That night, he dreamed of Garrett, his brother's face half hidden in mist, reaching out but saying nothing. When Tom woke, his heart was pounding, and he swore he heard footsteps above, faint, deliberate, gone when he strained to listen. The next day, they climbed higher, following the faint trail of markers Della had left. At 2,800 feet, they found a shallow cave, its entrance hidden by an overhang. Inside, the air was damp, the walls etched with more Shoshone-like carvings, spirals, jagged lines, and what looked like a stylized figure with elongated limbs. Lena photographed them, her hands trembling. "These are older," she said, "but some are fresh, like someone added to them recently." Tom's flashlight caught a glint in the corner. A metal carabiner, identical to the one found at the camp, but this one was new, its gate smooth and unweathered. Marcus bagged it as evidence, his jaw tight. "This wasn't here in 2014, he said. "Someone's been up here since." The discovery electrified the team, but the cave offered no more clues. No gear, no remains, just the carvings and an oppressive sense of being watched. Riley, scanning the cave with a thermal camera, froze. "There's a heat signature," she whispered, pointing to a crevice at the back. It was faint, fleeting, but unmistakable. Tom's pulse raced as he approached. His ice axe raised, but the crevice was empty, the heat gone. "Could have been an animal," Riley said, but her voice lacked conviction. The mountain was playing tricks or something was. They pushed on, driven by the need to reach the summit, now only 1,000 feet above. The climb grew brutal, the rocks slick with seepage, the wind a constant roar. At 3,200 feet, they found another marker, a piton with a loop of orange cord, but this one was different. The cord was knotted in a complex pattern, unlike Della's simple ties. Marcus, who'd studied knots as a detective, frowned. "This is a bowline with a double hitch," he said. "It's not standard climbing practice. It's decorative, almost ritualistic." Lena's eyes widened. The Shoshone used knots like this in ceremonies, to bind offerings or mark sacred sites. Tom felt a chill, not from the wind but from the growing sense that they were trespassing on something ancient, something that didn't want them there. The summit was in sight, a jagged crown of rock bathed in the cold light of dawn, but the final pitch was the most treacherous yet, a near-vertical slab with few holds, exposed to the full force of the wind. Riley led, her strength flagging but her focus razor-sharp. Halfway up, she screamed, nearly losing her grip. "Something moved," she shouted, pointing to a ledge above. Tom squinted, seeing nothing but rock and shadow, but Riley insisted. A figure, tall and thin, had darted out of sight. Marcus, panting from the climb, muttered about stress and optics, but Tom saw the doubt in his eyes. They reached the summit at dusk, exhausted but triumphant, only to find it barren. No gear, no markers, no sign of Garrett or Della. But there, in the center of the flat expanse, was a small pile of stones, arranged in a spiral. At its heart was another wooden bear, identical to the one found in Della's sleeping bag, but this one was freshly carved, its wood pale and unweathered. Tom's hands shook as he picked it up, his mind reeling. "This can't be," he whispered. Lena examined it, her face pale. "It's new," she said. "Someone's been here recently." Marcus scanned the horizon, his hand on the satellite phone. "We need to call this in," he said, but the signal was dead, the phone's screen flickering with static. The team stood in silence, the wind howling around them, the spiral of stones seeming to pulse with a life of its own. Tom clutched the bear, its weight both familiar and alien, a link to his brother and niece but also to something darker, something the mountain had kept hidden for 11 years. They camped on the summit, too drained to descend in the dark, their portal edges swaying like fragile cocoons. That night the sounds returned. Footsteps, whispers, a low hum that seemed to rise from the rock itself. Riley woke the team, her voice trembling. "It's out there," she said, pointing to the darkness beyond their camp. Tom grabbed his flashlight, sweeping it across the summit, but saw only shadows. Lena, clutching her notebook, began reciting a Shoshone prayer she'd learned, her words swallowed by the wind. Marcus, ever practical, checked the anchors, but even he couldn't hide his unease. The mountain was alive, its secrets circling them like predators. At dawn they prepared to descend, the new bear figurine tucked safely in Tom's pack. The summit had given them no answers, only more questions. Who had carved the bear? Who had tied the knotted cord? And what was the watcher Della had seen? As they rappelled down, Tom felt the mountain's gaze, heavy and unrelenting, as if it were warning him to leave its secrets buried. Back at the base, they reported their findings to Sarah Tillman, who added the new evidence to her growing file. The carved bear and knotted cord were sent for analysis, but Tom knew the truth lay higher, in the mountain's heart. He vowed to return to climb again to find Garrett and Della, or at least the peace of knowing what had taken them. The memorial at the trailhead grew larger, climbers leaving tokens of respect, a carabiner, a rope, a prayer. Ellen, waiting below, held the new bear figurine, tears streaming down her face. "They're still out there," she said, her voice a mix of hope and despair. Tom nodded, but in his heart, he felt the mountain's pull, its promise of answers and its threat of silence, a paradox he could neither escape nor ignore. Whispers in the stone. The descent from MtHooker's summit left Tom Beckwith and his team battered, their bodies bruised from the grueling climb and their minds haunted by the enigmatic discoveries atop the peak. The second wooden bear, freshly carved and inexplicably placed in the stone spiral, sat heavy in Tom's pack, its presence a silent accusation that the mountain still held secrets it wasn't ready to relinquish. Back at the base camp, the late August sun cast long shadows across the Wind River Range, and the memorial for Garrett and Della pulsed with fresh offerings. Flowers, climbing chalk, handwritten notes from strangers moved by the renewed headlines. Ellen Beckwith waited there, her eyes red-rimmed but resolute, clutching the first bear figurine as Tom recounted their findings. The knotted cord, the cave carvings, the fleeting heat signature, and the new bear figurine painted a picture that defied logic, teetering between the tangible and the otherworldly. Ranger Sarah Tillman, coordinating the official response, listened with a furrowed brow, her skepticism strained by the mounting evidence. "We're sending the new artifacts to a lab in Denver," she said, her voice clipped. "But I'll be honest, Tom, this is starting to feel like chasing ghosts." Tom didn't argue. He felt it too, the sense that MtHooker was more than rock and ice, that it held a presence that watched and waited. The team's findings reignited public interest, with social media buzzing on platforms like X, where climbers and conspiracy theorists alike dissected every detail. Posts speculated about everything from ancient curses to government cover-ups, one user claiming, "MtHooker's been weird forever. My uncle saw lights up there in '98. Tom ignored the noise, but Marcus Reed, the private investigator, sifted through it, cross-referencing online chatter with his own leads. He was particularly fixated on the transient climber Jace, whose name kept surfacing in old climbing forums. A post from 2014 described Jace as unhinged, obsessed with proving himself on big walls, and Marcus tracked down a grainy photo of a lanky man with a shaved head at a Lander bar, time-stamped a week before the Beckwiths vanished. The trail was thin, but Marcus requested access to local police records, hoping to connect Jace to the mountain. Meanwhile, Lena Carver, the anthropologist, dove deeper into the Shoshone connection, meeting with a tribal elder named Esther Red Owl in Riverton. Esther, a woman in her 70s with a voice like weathered leather, confirmed the mountain's sacred status. "Hooker's a place of crossing," she said, her eyes distant. Spirits move there between worlds. The carvings you found, they're not just protection. They're a map, a way to guide or trap what walks the stone. She spoke of the Watchers. Entities neither human nor animal, said to guard sacred peaks and test those who trespass. Lena showed her photos of the carvings, and Esther's face tightened. These are new, she said, pointing to the fresher marks. Someone's been talking to the mountain, or it's been talking back. The idea sent a shiver through Lena, who shared it with Tom and Marcus over coffee at the base camp, the wind rattling the tent flaps. Tom, grappling with his grief and the surreal clues, felt torn between his rational climber's mind and the pull of something older, something Esther's words seemed to awaken. He decided to organize another expedition, this time targeting the cave they'd found at 2,800 feet, believing it held more answers. Riley, shaken by her glimpse of the figure on the summit pitch, was hesitant but agreed to join, driven by loyalty to Tom and a nagging need to understand what she'd seen. Marcus, now more invested than ever, trained rigorously to improve his climbing skills, while Lena brought along a portable spectrometer to analyze the cave's rock composition, hoping to date the carvings. The team set out in early September, the mountain now dusted with the first hints of snow, its mood even more forbidding. The climb to the cave was punishing, the rocks slicker than before, the air biting at their exposed skin. Tom led, his hands steady but his heart pounding with memories of Garrett's voice. One hold at a time, Tommy. At the cave, they found the carvings unchanged, but the carabiner they'd seen before was gone, replaced by a small pile of stones arranged in a spiral, mirroring the one on the summit. Lena's spectrometer revealed the cave's granite was laced with unusual minerals, quartz with trace elements of beryllium, rare for the region. This could amplify electromagnetic fields, she said, half to herself. Maybe that's why people see things up here. Marcus scoffed, but his eyes darted to the shadows, where the crevice that had shown a heat signature now seemed darker, deeper. Riley, setting up a motion-activated camera, caught another anomaly, a flicker of light, brief but bright, emanating from the crevice's depths. The footage, grainy but unmistakable, showed a shape moving, too tall and thin to be a climber, vanishing before it could be defined. "That's what I saw," Riley whispered, her voice trembling. Tom replayed the footage, his stomach knotting. It wasn't proof, but it was enough to make him question everything. They spent 2 days in the cave, documenting every detail, but the mountain seemed to shift around them. Tools went missing, only to reappear in odd places. Faint scratches appeared on their gear overnight, too precise to be accidental. Lena found another carving, hidden behind a loose rock, a figure with elongated limbs holding what looked like a rope. "This isn't Shoshone," she said. "It's something else, something older." She refused to elaborate, her face pale, but Tom sensed she was holding back, perhaps out of fear. Marcus, ever the pragmatist, pushed for a rational explanation, suggesting a rival climber or a hermit living off-grid. He radioed Sarah to check for reports of unauthorized climbers in 2014 or since, but the satellite phone crackled with static, the signal dropping inexplicably. The team's unease grew, and Tom began to feel the mountain's presence as a physical weight, pressing on his chest, clouding his thoughts. On the third night, camped in the cave, Tom woke to a low hum, like the vibration of a tuning fork, emanating from the rock itself. He grabbed his flashlight, sweeping it across the cave, and saw nothing, but the hum persisted, joined by faint footsteps, circling just beyond the light's reach. Riley, awake and wide-eyed, clutched her ice axe, whispering, "It's the Watcher." Lena began chanting softly, another Shoshone prayer, while Marcus checked the camera, which had shut off despite a full battery. The hum stopped abruptly, leaving a silence so profound it felt like a void. At dawn, they found a new clue outside the cave. A piece of rope, weathered but unmistakably Garrett's, its distinctive green and yellow weave matching the gear he'd carried. It was coiled tightly, knotted in the same ritualistic pattern as the orange cord. Tom's hands shook as he held it, his mind racing. "This wasn't here before," he said, his voice hoarse. Marcus bagged it, noting scuff marks on the rock nearby, as if someone had stood there recently. The discovery broke something in Tom. He felt closer to Garrett and Della than ever, yet further from answers. They descended to the base, the rope and footage their only trophies, but the mountain's grip on them lingered. Sarah met them, her face grim as she shared news. The lab in Denver had analyzed the second bear figurine. Its wood was local, cut within the last year, and bore traces of human DNA. not Della's or Garrett's, but an unknown male's. The carvings on the first bear, meanwhile, showed microscopic tool marks inconsistent with Garrett's known carving techniques, suggesting someone else had altered it. Marcus seized on the DNA, renewing his search for Jace, while Lena contacted Esther again, who warned that disturbing the mountain further could wake what sleeps. Ellen, holding the rope, wept silently, recognizing its pattern from a photo of Garrett and Della gearing up in 2014. The climbing community, following the updates on X, organized a vigil at the trailhead, their candles flickering against the dusk. Tom, staring at the cliff, felt the pull to return to climb again, but Marcus urged caution. "We're missing something," he said. "Someone's been up there, leaving these clues, playing with us." Riley, shaken but resolute, volunteered to analyze the footage with a tech expert, hoping to enhance the image of the watcher. Lena, meanwhile, began sketching the carvings, piecing together a theory that the mountain was a nexus, a place where the veil between worlds thinned. Tom listened, torn between disbelief and the evidence piling up around him. The memorial grew, now a sprawling tapestry of grief and hope, with climbers leaving pitons etched with messages. For Garrett and Della, forever climbing. Ellen, clutching both bear figurines, made a decision. She'd fund one final expedition, not just for answers but to lay her family to rest, spiritually if not physically. Tom agreed, knowing the mountain would call him back, its whispers louder now, its shadows longer. As the team planned their next move, the wind carried a faint hum, like the mountain itself was breathing, waiting for them to return and face whatever it guarded. The mountain's final whisper. The Wind River Range stood silent in the early autumn of 2025, its peaks dusted with fresh snow as Tom Beckwith prepared for what he swore would be his final climb up MtHooker. The discoveries from the previous expedition, the knotted rope, the fresh bear figurine, the eerie cave carvings, had left him sleepless. His dreams plagued by visions of Garrett's hand slipping from his grasp and Della's voice calling through the mist. Ellen, now frail but unyielding, had funded this last effort. Her savings poured into hiring a larger team, including a drone specialist, a geologist, and a Shoshone guide named Daniel Red Owl, Esther's grandson, who carried his grandmother's warnings about the mountain's watchers. Tom's team, Riley, Marcus, and Lena, returned, their resolve hardened despite the fear that clung to them like frost. The climbing community, galvanized by posts on X and candlelit vigils at the trailhead, watched with bated breath, their hashtags, #MtHooker Mystery, #Find the Beckwiths, trending as the expedition began. Sarah Tillman, the ranger, coordinated from below, her radio crackling with updates as helicopters circled, their blades slicing through the thin mountain air. The plan was simple but perilous. Revisit the cave at 2,800 feet, then push beyond the summit to a series of unexplored fissures rumored to riddle the mountain's eastern flank, hidden by sheer cliffs and unstable scree. Daniel, whose quiet demeanor belied his deep knowledge of the land, carried a small pouch of sage and cedar, a gift from Esther to appease the mountain. As they ascended, the rock felt colder, sharper, as if resisting their intrusion. Tom led the first pitch, his hands steady but his heart racing, each hold a memory of Garrett teaching him to climb decades ago. Riley followed, her eyes scanning for the watcher she'd glimpsed before, her camera rigged to record continuously. Marcus, now a competent climber, carried forensic tools, determined to find physical evidence of Jace or whoever else might have left the recent clues. Lena, armed with a portable X-ray fluorescence analyzer, aimed to study the cave's minerals further, suspecting their properties amplified the mountain's strange phenomena. The cave, when they reached it, was unchanged, its spiral of stone still intact, but the air felt heavier, charged with a static hum that set their teeth on edge. Daniel lit the sage, its smoke curling upward, and whispered a prayer in Shoshone, his voice steady but urgent. The carvings glowed faintly under Lena's UV light, revealing new marks, fresh scratches forming a jagged arrow pointing deeper into the crevice. "Someone's been here," Lena said, her voice barely above a whisper. Marcus swept the crevice with a thermal camera, and this time the heat signature was undeniable, a pulsing glow human-shaped but impossibly tall, vanishing into the rock. Riley's camera caught it too, the footage showing a fleeting figure, its edges blurred, moving with unnatural speed. Tom's breath caught. It was the watcher, just as Della had described. They followed the arrow, crawling through the crevice, which widened into a narrow chamber, its walls slick with moisture and etched with more carvings, spirals, figures, and symbols that Daniel identified as warnings, not maps. "This is a place of binding," he said, his voice trembling. "Something was trapped here long ago." In the chamber center was a crude altar, a flat stone stained dark, surrounded by offerings. Feathers, beads, and chillingly a third wooden bear, its wood so fresh it still smelled of sap. Tom clutched it, his hands shaking, recognizing Garrett's carving style in its rough edges, but the DNA from the previous bear haunted him. It wasn't Garrett's. Marcus found traces of blood on the altar, too small for a fatal wound but fresh, as if left days ago. Lena's analyzer beeped, detecting high levels of beryllium and uranium, minerals that could disrupt electronics, and she theorized human perception explaining the hums, lights, and shadows. But Daniel shook his head. "This isn't science," he said. "The mountain keeps what it takes." The team pressed deeper, the chamber narrowing into a tunnel that sloped downward, the air growing colder, the hum louder. Riley's camera battery died despite being fully charged, and Marcus's radio sputtered, catching only fragments of Sarah's voice. At the tunnel's end, they found a ledge overlooking a vast chasm, its depths lost in darkness. There, embedded in the rock, was a final clue. Garrett's harness, its webbing frayed but intact, clipped to a piton with a single word carved into it. Della. Tom's knees buckled, tears streaming as he realized Garrett had been here, had left this for his daughter. But where was she? The chasm offered no answers, its silence mocking their efforts. Daniel lit more sage, chanting louder, and the hum ceased, replaced by a low wail, like wind through a broken flute. Riley, trembling, pointed to the opposite wall, where a shadow moved. Not a figure, but a distortion, tall and thin, its edges flickering like static. "It's protecting something," Daniel said, his voice steady now. "Or hiding it." Marcus, ever practical, tossed a glow stick into the chasm. Its light swallowed instantly. "We can't go down there," he said, but Tom was already rigging a rope, driven by a need to end the mystery. Lena grabbed his arm. "This is what it wants," she said. "To keep you like it kept them." Tom hesitated, the harness in his hand, the word Della burning in his mind. He saw her face, her braid, her stubborn grin, and Garrett's steady gaze, urging him to climb on. But Daniel's warning echoed, and for the first time, Tom felt the mountain's will, ancient and unyielding, whispering not of answers but of surrender. He unclipped the rope, stepping back, the harness clutched to his chest. The team retreated, the chasm's wail fading behind them, the carvings dimming as if the mountain had closed its eyes. At the base, they presented the harness to Ellen, who held it wordlessly, her fingers tracing the carved name. Sarah's team searched the chasm with drones, finding nothing but rock and shadow. The lab confirmed the blood on the altar was Della's, from a minor cut, but the bear's DNA remained unidentified, a ghost in their data. Marcus tracked Jace to a dead end, a death certificate from 2016, ruling out his involvement. Lena published a paper on the mountain's minerals, hinting at electromagnetic anomalies but avoiding the Watcher. Daniel returned to his grandmother, who burned the sage pouch, saying the mountain had spoken its last. The climbing community mourned, the memorial now a shrine, its pitons and flowers a testament to Garrett and Della's legacy. Tom and Ellen moved forward, not with closure but with acceptance, the harness and bears displayed in their home, symbols of a bond unbroken by loss. The mountain kept its secrets, its watchers silent, but in the quiet Tom heard Della's voice, faint but clear. "I'm trying, Dad." And he knew wherever they were together, climbing still, in a place beyond the rock, beyond the shadows, where the mountain could no longer hold them.